Undercover Billionaire falls for nurse assistant after she shows him real care. Daniel had exactly 29 days left to live, and he was about to meet the only person who would ever love him for who he really was. Not that Destiny knew any of this as she walked into room 314 at Mercy General Hospital that Tuesday morning, carrying fresh flowers and the kind of smile that made dying patients remember why living had been worth it. "Good morning, Mr. Adams," she said, checking the chart that listed him as a construction worker recovering from a workplace accident. "How are we feeling today?" Daniel looked up from the hospital bed where he'd been staring out the window, calculating how many sunrises he had left. 30 days ago, the best oncologist money could buy had delivered news that his $4.2 billion fortune couldn't change. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, inoperable, untreatable, unsurvivable. "We're feeling like we want to know why you always say, 'when you mean you,'" he replied, studying the face of the woman who'd been assigned as his nursing assistant. Destiny laughed, a sound that was genuinely warm instead of the practiced professional cheer he'd expected. "Because healing isn't something you do alone. It's something we do together, even if I'm just the person who brings you Jell-O and makes sure you don't fall down in the shower." Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Drop it in the comments below. It always amazes me how far these stories travel, from the US to Canada, the UK, Africa, and beyond. And while you're here, don't forget to hit subscribe and give this video a like so you won't miss the next story. Now let's get started. Daniel had spent his entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Board members who wanted his approval, women who wanted his money, employees who wanted job security, doctors who wanted generous donations to their research programs. But Destiny was looking at him like he mattered simply because he was human, not because he could write checks that changed lives. "What kind of construction work do you do, Mr. Adams?" she asked, checking his four-line with gentle efficiency. Daniel had rehearsed this lie for the 3 days since he'd checked himself into Mercy General under a false identity. He'd chosen this hospital specifically because it served working-class patients who couldn't afford the private medical centers where his real identity would be recognized. Mostly commercial buildings. Nothing fancy, just honest work with my hands. It wasn't entirely false. Daniel had built his fortune from nothing, starting with a small tech company in his garage and growing it into a global empire. But he'd never worked construction, never worried about paychecks, never experienced the kind of life that a man named Tom Adams would have lived. "That's good work," Destiny said, adjusting his pillows with the kind of attention to comfort that suggested she actually cared whether he slept well. "Building things that last, creating spaces where people live and work and build their own lives." Daniel felt something twist in his chest that had nothing to do with the cancer slowly destroying his pancreas. When was the last time someone had talked to him about the value of his work rather than its profitability? "What about you? What made you want to become a nursing assistant?" Destiny paused in her task of replacing his water pitcher, and Daniel caught a glimpse of something deeper than professional pleasantness. "I like taking care of people. And I'm good at seeing what people need, not just what they think they want." "Is there a difference?" "Usually. Most people think they want to be left alone when they're hurting. What they actually need is to know that someone cares enough to stay." Daniel looked at Destiny's face, seeing intelligence and compassion that had nothing to do with his bank account or his business reputation. She was probably 26 or 27, with the kind of natural beauty that didn't require expensive maintenance, and she was treating him like his comfort mattered. "Do you have family, Mr. Adams?" The question hit Daniel like a physical blow. He had family, technically. A brother who'd been trying to have him declared mentally incompetent so he could control the family business. A sister who'd been angling for early inheritance distributions for years. Parents who'd been dead for a decade, but who'd spent his childhood teaching him that love was something you earned through achievement rather than something you received because you existed. "Not really," he said honestly. "It's mostly just me. I'm sorry to hear that. Everyone deserves people who care about them. What about you? Do you have people who care about you? Destiny smiled, but Daniel caught a flicker of something that looked like exhaustion. I have my little brother Marcus. He's 17, senior in high school. I've been taking care of him since our parents died in a car accident 4 years ago. Daniel processed what Destiny was telling him. She was raising a teenager while working as a nursing assistant, which meant she was probably struggling financially while maintaining the kind of cheerful competence that made him feel like his well-being mattered to someone. That must be difficult. It's worth it. Marcus is brilliant, probably going to get a full scholarship to study engineering. Everything I do is about making sure he has opportunities one never had. Daniel wanted to ask what opportunities she'd missed, wanted to understand the life choices that had led her to this job, this hospital, this moment where she was bringing comfort to a dying man who'd lied to her about everything except how much her kindness meant to him. But before he could formulate the question, Dr. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Mr. Adams, how are you feeling today? Daniel had been careful to choose a doctor who worked in public hospitals, someone who wouldn't recognize him from charity galas or medical center board meetings. Dr. Rodriguez was young, idealistic, and dedicated to patients who couldn't afford private health care. I'm feeling better than expected, Daniel said, which was true in ways that had nothing to do with his terminal diagnosis. That's what we like to hear. Destiny, could I speak with you in the hallway for a moment? As they stepped outside his room, Daniel could hear fragments of their conversation through the partially open door. How is he adjusting to the treatment plan? Better than most patients with his prognosis. He seems at peace with the situation, which is unusual for someone so young. Any family support? He says he doesn't have family. I think he's been alone for a while. Keep an eye on his mental state. Isolation can complicate end-of-life care. Daniel felt cold understanding wash over him. Dr. Rodriguez and Destiny were discussing his case as if he were actually dying, which meant that his false medical records had been convincing enough to fool healthcare professionals. But they were also discussing his case with the kind of compassion and attention that suggested they genuinely cared about his comfort during what they believed were his final weeks. When Destiny returned to his room, her expression was carefully neutral, but Daniel could see concern in her eyes. Is there anything you need, Mr. Adams? Anything I can do to make you more comfortable? Daniel looked at this woman who was worrying about the comfort of a stranger, who was working to support her teenage brother, who was treating him with more genuine kindness than he'd experienced in years of wealth and success. Actually, there is something. What's that? Could you call me Daniel? Mr. Adams makes me feel like an old man. Destiny smiled, and Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced since his diagnosis: hope. Not hope that he would survive, but hope that the time he had left might include moments of authentic human connection. Of course, Daniel. Is there anything else? Could you tell me about Marcus? What kind of engineering does he want to study? For the next hour, Destiny told Daniel about her brother's dreams of becoming a civil engineer, about his passion for designing bridges and buildings that would help communities thrive. She talked about his academic achievements, his college applications, her hopes that he would have opportunities she'd never imagined for herself. Daniel listened with the kind of attention he'd never given to quarterly earnings reports or merger negotiations, understanding that Destiny was sharing the most important part of her life with someone she barely knew because she believed caring about others was simply what decent people did. Destiny, can I ask you something personal? Sure. What did you want to be when you were Marcus's age? Before you had to take care of him, what were your dreams? Destiny was quiet for a moment, and Daniel could see her deciding whether to trust him with a truth she might not share often. I wanted to be a doctor. I was pre-med in college when our parents died. I had to drop out to take care of Marcus and find work that would support us both. Do you ever regret that choice? Never. Marcus needed someone who would put his future first. And I've learned that taking care of people doesn't require a medical degree. It just requires caring about their well-being more than your own convenience. Daniel felt tears threaten as he realized that Destiny had sacrificed her own dreams to ensure her brother could achieve his, and she'd done it without resentment or self-pity. "You're remarkable," he said, meaning it in ways that went beyond anything he'd ever felt about another person. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." "No, you're not. Most people wouldn't sacrifice their dreams for someone else's future. Most people wouldn't treat strangers with the kind of care you show your patients. Most people wouldn't make me feel like my life has value when I've spent months believing it doesn't." Destiny looked at Daniel with surprise. "Daniel, your life has enormous value. Not because of what you've accomplished or what you can contribute, but because you're a human being who deserves love and care and dignity." "Even if I'm dying?" The question slipped out before Daniel could stop it, and he watched Destiny's face change as she processed what he'd revealed. "Especially if you're dying," she said quietly. "No one should face that alone." Daniel looked at this woman who just promised to help him face death with dignity, who didn't know that he could solve every financial problem in her life with a single phone call, who was caring for him because she believed every person deserved compassion. "Destiny, would it be inappropriate if I said I'm grateful to be here? In this hospital, with you taking care of me?" "It wouldn't be inappropriate. But Daniel, you don't have to be grateful for basic human decency. You deserve to be treated with kindness." That night, after Destiny had finished her shift and gone home to help Marcus with homework, Daniel lay in his hospital bed thinking about the choice he'd made to spend his final 30 days as Tom Adams rather than Daniel Morrison. Tom Adams was a construction worker with no family and limited resources, facing death in a public hospital where nursing assistants worked double shifts to support their teenage brothers. Daniel Morrison was a billionaire with a fortune that could fund medical research, establish scholarships, and ensure that people like Destiny never had to choose between their dreams and their family responsibilities. But Tom Adams was the man Destiny cared about. Tom Adams was the person she saw as worthy of love and attention. Tom Adams was dying with someone who genuinely wanted to ease his suffering. Daniel Morrison had spent his life being loved for what he could provide rather than who he was. For the first time since his diagnosis, Daniel felt something that might have been peace. But as he drifted off to sleep, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that lying to Destiny about his identity was somehow betraying the very authenticity that made her care about him. 29 days to live. 29 days to experience love that wasn't motivated by money. 29 days to decide whether dying as Tom Adams was worth living as a lie. And 29 days to figure out whether the truth about Daniel Morrison would destroy the only genuine relationship he'd ever had. As monitors beeped softly in the darkness and Destiny's flowers filled his room with the scent of life, Daniel Morrison began the countdown to a death that might teach him more about living than 34 years of wealth and success had ever revealed. But some secrets are too heavy to carry alone. And some lies are too important to maintain forever. Especially when the person you're lying to is the only person who's ever made you want to be honest about everything. Day 27 brought the first real pain. Daniel woke up at 3 a.m. with fire spreading through his abdomen, the kind of agony that made him understand why some people welcomed death as relief. He'd been expecting this. Pancreatic cancer was notorious for the suffering it caused, but experiencing it was different from anticipating it. He pressed the call button, not because he thought pain medication would help much, but because lying alone in darkness made the reality of his situation too overwhelming to bear. Destiny appeared in his doorway within 2 minutes, still wearing the scrubs from her previous shift. She must have been pulling a double again. "Daniel, what's wrong?" "Just some pain. I didn't expect you to still be here. I wasn't going to leave when you might need help." She checked his chart, then began adjusting his four with the kind of gentle efficiency that suggested she'd done this countless times for countless patients. "Dr. Rodriguez increased your pain medication dosage. This should help within a few minutes." "Destiny, you've been here for 16 hours. Don't you need to go home?" Marcus is at a study group tonight. Finals week. I'd rather be here making sure you're comfortable than sitting at home worrying about you. Daniel felt tears threaten as he realized that Destiny was choosing to spend her free time caring for him rather than resting or pursuing her own interests. You worry about me? Of course I worry about you. You're facing something terrifying, and you're doing it alone. Nobody should have to do that. The pain medication was beginning to work, but Daniel found himself more focused on what Destiny had just revealed than on his physical discomfort. Destiny, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? You can tell me anything. I've never had someone worry about me before. Not really. I've had people worry about my decisions or my health because it affected them somehow, but I've never had someone care about my well-being just because they wanted me to be okay. Destiny sat down in the chair beside his bed, settling in like she planned to stay until he was sleeping peacefully. That makes me sad, Daniel. Everyone deserves to have people who care about them without expecting anything in return. What makes you care about people the way you do? Destiny was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the kind of thoughtfulness that suggested she'd examined her own motivations. I think losing my parents taught me how fragile life is, and how precious it is when someone chooses to share their time and attention with you. Every day we get with people we care about is a gift. Even when those people are dying? Especially when those people are dying. That's when caring matters most. Daniel looked at Destiny's face in the dim light from the hallway, seeing someone whose capacity for love hadn't been diminished by loss, someone whose experiences with grief had made her more generous rather than more guarded. Destiny, what was your childhood like? Before you lost your parents? Happy. Really happy. My parents loved each other in ways that made me believe in love, and they loved Marcus and me in ways that made us feel safe and valued. Tell me about them. For the next hour, as pain medication made Daniel drowsy and comfortable, Destiny told him about her father who'd been a mechanic but who'd read poetry to his children every night before bed. About her mother who'd worked as a secretary but who'd made every holiday magical through creativity rather than expensive gifts. They taught me that love isn't about what you can afford to give someone, Destiny said. It's about what you choose to give of yourself. And that's why you're here at 3 a.m. instead of getting sleep you need? That's why I'm here. Because you matter, Daniel. Your comfort matters, your fears matter, your life matters. Daniel felt something break open in his chest as he realized that Destiny meant every word she was saying. She wasn't caring for him because it was her job or because she felt obligated. She was caring for him because she decided his well-being was worth her time and attention. Destiny, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Okay. If you knew someone was lying to you about something important, but they were lying because they were afraid the truth would change how you felt about them, would you want to know the truth? Destiny studied Daniel's face, and he could see her trying to understand what he was really asking. I think, she said carefully, that real love means accepting someone completely, including the parts of them they're afraid to show you. But real love also means trusting someone enough to be honest with them. Even if the truth might hurt them? Even if the truth might hurt them. Because lies hurt more than truth, even when the truth is difficult. Daniel processed what Destiny was telling him, understanding that she was describing exactly the kind of authentic relationship he'd always wanted but had never believed was possible for someone with his wealth and status. Destiny, what if someone had made choices in their life that seemed to put them in a completely different world from yours? Would that change how you felt about them as a person? You mean like if someone was very wealthy, or very poor, or from a different background? Daniel's heart raced as he realized Destiny was intuiting the direction of his questions. Something like that. Daniel, I've learned that people's circumstances don't determine their character. I've met wealthy people who were generous and kind, and wealthy people who were selfish and cruel. I've met poor people who were bitter and resentful, and poor people who were loving and compassionate. So someone's money wouldn't matter to you? Not in terms of whether I cared about them. It might matter in terms of whether we could build a life together, just because different circumstances create different challenges. But caring about someone? That's about who they are, not what they have. Daniel felt hope and terror in equal measure as he realized that Destiny was describing exactly the kind of love he'd dreamed of but had convinced himself was impossible for someone in his position. Destiny, what if someone cared about you but they'd made mistakes in how they approached the relationship? If their intentions were good but their methods were questionable? I think intentions matter, but so do actions. If someone cared about me enough to be honest about their mistakes, if they were willing to do the work to repair any damage they'd caused, then caring about them wouldn't be a mistake. Even if they'd lied to you? Especially if they'd lied to me, because being honest about lies takes more courage than telling the truth from the beginning. Daniel looked at Destiny, seeing someone whose capacity for forgiveness was as remarkable as her capacity for love. Someone who might actually be able to accept the truth about who he was and why he'd chosen to hide his identity. Destiny, there's something I need to tell you. Before Daniel could continue, Dr. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. How are we doing in here? Much better, Daniel said, though he was frustrated by the interrupted conversation. The pain medication is helping. Good. Destiny, you should go home and get some rest. You've been here almost 18 hours. I want to make sure Daniel is comfortable before I leave. He's stable for now, and you'll be more helpful to him tomorrow if you're not exhausted. Daniel could see Destiny weighing her desire to stay with him against her professional obligations and her own need for rest. Go home, Daniel said. I'll be fine for a few hours. Are you sure? I'm sure. But Destiny? Yes. Could you come see me tomorrow morning? Before your shift starts? There's something important I want to talk to you about. Of course. I'll bring coffee. After Destiny left, Dr. Rodriguez checked Daniel's vital signs and reviewed his medication schedule. Mr. Adams, I need to discuss your prognosis with you. Daniel felt cold dread settle in his stomach. What about it? Your condition is progressing faster than we initially projected. The pain you experienced tonight suggests that the cancer is affecting additional organs. How much time do I have? It's difficult to predict precisely, but I'd estimate 2 to 3 weeks rather than the month we originally discussed. Daniel felt the world shift around him as he realized that his 30 days had just been reduced to perhaps 15. Half the time he'd thought he had to experience authentic love, half the time to decide whether to tell Destiny the truth about his identity. Dr. Rodriguez, what happens as my condition gets worse? The pain will increase, though we'll manage it as aggressively as possible. You'll experience more fatigue, possible nausea, and eventually difficulty with basic functions. Will I be able to have conversations? Will I be mentally alert? For most of the remaining time, yes. But I'd recommend having any important conversations sooner rather than later. After Dr. Rodriguez left, Daniel lay in his hospital bed calculating the impossible mathematics of his situation. 15 days to tell Destiny the truth about his identity. 15 days to explain why he'd lied to her. 15 days to experience whatever authentic love was possible between them. And 15 days to figure out how to use his wealth to ensure Destiny and Marcus would be secure after his death, without making his care for her feel like a transaction. Daniel had built a business empire by making strategic decisions under pressure, but he'd never faced a decision where the stakes were emotional rather than financial, where success was measured in human connection rather than profit margins. The next morning, Destiny arrived at 6 a.m. with coffee and homemade muffins. How did you sleep? She asked, settling into the chair where she'd spent half the night before. Better than expected. How's Marcus? Stressed about calculus, excited about his college applications, generally being a brilliant 17-year-old who thinks he knows everything. Does he know about your job here? About the hours you work? He knows I work at the hospital. He doesn't know how many extra hours I pick up to help pay for his college applications and SAT prep courses. Daniel felt his chest tighten as he realized that Destiny was working herself to exhaustion to provide opportunities for her brother, just as she'd sacrificed her own education to ensure his future. Destiny, what would it mean to you if Marcus got a full scholarship to college? It would mean everything. It would mean all the sacrifices were worth it, and he'd have opportunities to build whatever life he chooses. And what would it mean to you if you could go back to school? If you could finish your pre-med degree? Destiny's face changed, showing a flash of longing that she quickly controlled. That's not really an option anymore. Even if I could afford tuition, I can't afford to not work while going to school. But if it were possible? If somehow the financial obstacles weren't there? Daniel, why are you asking me these questions? Because I care about your future. Because I want to understand what would make you happy. What would make me happy is knowing that you're comfortable and that you don't have to face this alone. Daniel realized that Destiny was deflecting questions about her own dreams because she was focused entirely on his well-being, putting his needs ahead of her own just as she'd been doing since they met. Destiny, I need to tell you something important. What? Daniel looked at this woman who'd shown him more authentic love in 5 days than he'd experienced in 34 years, who'd sacrificed her own education to raise her brother, who was working double shifts to afford college application fees. My name isn't Tom Adams. Destiny went very still, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. What? My real name is Daniel Morrison. I'm not a construction worker. I'm not poor. And I'm not dying from a workplace accident. Then what are you dying from? Pancreatic cancer. That part is true. But everything else I've told you about my background has been a lie. Destiny set down her coffee cup and looked directly at Daniel, her expression unreadable. Why did you lie to me? Because I wanted to experience what it felt like to be cared for as a person rather than as a potential source of money or status. Because I've never had someone love me for who I am instead of what I can provide. And who are you, Daniel Morrison? Daniel took a breath, preparing to reveal the truth that might destroy the only authentic relationship he'd ever had. I'm worth $4.2 billion. I own a technology company, real estate developments, and investment portfolios that most people can't imagine. I've spent my adult life being pursued by people who wanted access to my wealth. Destiny stared at Daniel, processing what he'd just revealed. You're a billionaire. Yes. And you've been lying to me for 5 days about your entire identity. Yes. Why are you telling me now? Because I'm falling in love with you, and I can't build something real with someone while lying about who I am. Destiny stood up from her chair and walked to the window, her back to Daniel as she absorbed the enormity of what he'd revealed. Destiny, please say something. I'm trying to figure out if anything you've told me has been true. My feelings for you are true. My gratitude for your care is true. My loneliness before I met you was true. But your name, your job, your background, your reasons for being in this hospital, all lies. All lies except the cancer. I really am dying. Destiny turned back to face Daniel, and he could see tears in her eyes. Daniel, I need some time to process this. I understand. I'll finish my shift today, but I need to think about whether I can continue caring for someone who's lied to me about everything. As Destiny left his room, Daniel realized that telling the truth might cost him the only love he'd ever known. But keeping the lie would have cost him the chance to find out if someone could love Daniel Morrison as much as they'd loved Tom Adams. With 2 weeks left to live, Daniel had chosen truth over comfort. Now he had to discover whether honesty was enough to earn forgiveness from the only person whose opinion had ever mattered to him. For the first time in 6 days, Daniel woke up alone. No gentle voice asking how he'd slept. No fresh flowers replacing yesterday's wilted ones. No warm smile that made him forget he was dying for a few precious hours. Just the sterile hospital room and the knowledge that he'd traded the only authentic love he'd ever known for the brutal honesty that Destiny had said mattered more than comfort. By 10 a.m., when Destiny's shift would normally have begun, Daniel understood that she wasn't coming back. The replacement nursing assistant was professional and competent, but she treated Daniel like a patient rather than a person. She checked his vitals, administered medications, and left without engaging in conversation beyond what was medically necessary. "Where's Destiny?" Daniel asked Dr. Rodriguez during afternoon rounds. She requested to be reassigned to a different floor. Something about a conflict of interest. Daniel felt the words like a physical blow. Conflict of interest. As if caring for him had become professionally inappropriate once she'd learned his real identity. "Can I speak with her?" "Mr. Morrison, and yes, I know who you really are now. Destiny has asked not to be contacted while she processes the situation. I think you should respect her wishes." "How did you find out?" Hospital administration ran a more thorough background check after some irregularities appeared in your insurance information. Your real identity was flagged this morning. Daniel realized that his carefully constructed false identity was unraveling, which meant other people would soon know that billionaire Daniel Morrison was dying in a public hospital under an assumed name. Dr. Rodriguez, how long before this becomes public knowledge? Hospital administration is bound by privacy laws, but information like this has a way of reaching the media. I'd estimate you have perhaps 48 hours before reporters start calling. Daniel closed his eyes, understanding that his remaining time was about to become even more complicated. Media attention, family members suddenly interested in his well-being, business associates wondering about succession plans. Everything he tried to escape by choosing to die as Tom Adams. That evening, as Daniel struggled with pain that seemed worse when he had to face it alone, he made a decision that felt both desperate and necessary. He called his personal assistant. "Jenny, it's Daniel." "Mr. Morrison." "Sir, we've been trying to reach you for a week. The board is asking questions about your absence, and there are contracts that require your approval." "Jenny, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it without asking questions." "Of course, sir. I want you to research a woman named Destiny Williams. She's a nursing assistant at Mercy General Hospital. I want to know about her financial situation, her brother's college prospects, any debts or obligations she's facing." "Sir, is this related to a donation or investment opportunity?" "It's related to making sure someone who's shown me extraordinary kindness doesn't continue struggling for things I could easily provide. I'll have the information by tomorrow morning." "And Jenny? This research stays between us. No one else in the company needs to know what I'm investigating." Daniel hung up and immediately regretted the decision. Was he trying to help Destiny, or was he trying to buy forgiveness for his deception? Was caring for her well-being an expression of love, or an attempt to control a relationship he'd already damaged? But as pain medication made him drowsy, Daniel couldn't shake the image of Destiny working 18-hour shifts to afford Marcus's college application fees. If he was going to die in 2 weeks, shouldn't he use his wealth to solve problems that would outlast his life? The next morning brought devastating news from 2 directions. Dr. Rodriguez delivered the medical update first. Daniel's condition was deteriorating faster than projected. The pain episodes were becoming more frequent and severe, and his energy levels were dropping dramatically. "We're looking at days rather than weeks," Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "I recommend contacting anyone you want to see before you become too weak for extended conversations." Before Daniel could process the implications of having perhaps a week left to live, Jenny called with her research results. "Sir, the information about Destiny Williams is concerning." "What did you find?" "She's been working 3 jobs to support herself and her brother. Nursing assistant at the hospital, evening shifts at a medical supply company, and weekend work at a clinic. She's approximately $40,000 in debt from student loans she took out before dropping out of pre-med. What about her brother? Marcus Williams, 17 years old, straight A student with SAT scores that would qualify him for full academic scholarships at several universities. But he needs application fees, test preparation, and living expenses that Destiny can't afford on her current income. How much would it cost to solve their financial problems completely? Student loan payoff, Marcus's college expenses, living costs that would allow her to reduce her work hours. Approximately $200,000 would transform their situation entirely. Daniel did mental math. $200,000 was less than he spent on art acquisitions in a typical year. It was a rounding error in his investment portfolio. It was nothing to him and everything to them. Jenny, I want you to set up anonymous payments to cover Destiny's student loans and Marcus's college expenses. Sir, that's a significant amount of money to spend on someone you've known for less than a week. It's not significant to me, and it's life-changing for them. How would you like the payment structured? Make it look like a scholarship for Marcus and a student loan forgiveness program for Destiny. Nothing that can be traced back to me personally. I'll handle the arrangements. But as Daniel hung up, he felt sick about what he'd just done. Was he helping Destiny because he loved her, or was he trying to assuage his guilt about lying to her? Would she see anonymous financial help as a gift, or would she somehow know it came from him and feel manipulated? His internal struggle was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Marcus Williams stood in the doorway of Daniel's hospital room, looking exactly like the brilliant 17-year-old Destiny had described, but carrying an expression of barely controlled anger. You're Daniel Morrison. Yes. The billionaire who's been lying to my sister. Yes. Marcus stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, his body language suggesting he was prepared for confrontation. Do you have any idea what you've done to her? Daniel felt his chest tighten as he realized that Destiny had shared the situation with her brother, probably seeking advice from the person whose opinion mattered most to her. I know I hurt her. That wasn't my intention, but I understand that intentions don't excuse the damage I caused. She's been crying for 2 days. Do you know how often I've seen my sister cry in the 4 years since our parents died? How often? Never. Not once. She held me while I cried. She stayed strong when we lost our house. She worked herself sick to make sure I had what I needed, but she never cried where I could see her. Daniel felt tears threaten as he understood that his deception had broken something in Destiny that years of genuine hardship hadn't touched. Marcus, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt her. Then why did you lie to her? Because I wanted to know what it felt like to be loved for who I am instead of what I have. Because I've spent my life being pursued by people who wanted my money, and I thought if she knew I was wealthy, her care for me wouldn't be genuine. Marcus studied Daniel's face with the intelligence Destiny had described, evaluating whether the explanation held any validity. So you tested her. You made her prove that she could love someone poor before you trusted her with the truth about your wealth. The accusation hit Daniel like a physical blow because it contained enough truth to be devastating. That's not how I thought about it, but yes. I suppose that's what I did. Do you understand why that's insulting? Why it suggests you don't trust her character or her integrity? Daniel realized that Marcus was articulating something he'd been too focused on his own needs to consider, that lying to Destiny had implied a fundamental distrust of her capacity for authentic love. You're right. I was so afraid of being used for my money that I didn't give her a chance to prove I could trust her with the truth. And now she doesn't know if anything about your relationship was real. But it was real. My feelings for her, my gratitude for her care, my appreciation for who she is as a person, all of that was completely genuine. Marcus sat down in the chair where Destiny had spent hours caring for Daniel, and his expression shifted from anger to something that looked like curiosity. Mr. Morrison, can I ask you something? Call me Daniel. And yes, you can ask me anything. Are you dying because you're rich, or are you dying because you're sick? The question caught Daniel off guard. I'm dying because I have pancreatic cancer that can't be treated successfully. But your money can't save you? My money can buy the best doctors, the most comfortable hospital rooms, experimental treatments that might extend my life by a few weeks. But it can't cure what I have. So right now, you're just a sick person who's scared and alone, regardless of how much money you have. Yes. And when destiny was taking care of you, you were receiving exactly what you needed, someone who cared about your comfort and your fear and your loneliness. Yes. So her care was real, and your need for it was real, even though your identity was fake. Daniel looked at Marcus, seeing the analytical intelligence that would make him an excellent engineer, but also seeing the emotional wisdom that suggested destiny had raised him to think about relationships with unusual depth. Marcus, what has destiny told you about the situation? She told me that she fell in love with someone who doesn't exist, and now she doesn't know if the person who does exist is someone she can trust. And what do you think? I think, Marcus said carefully, that falling in love with someone who's dying is already complicated enough without adding lies about identity. Do you think she can forgive me? I think the question isn't whether she can forgive you. The question is whether you can help her figure out if Daniel Morrison is someone worth loving, even though Tom Adams was someone she already loved. Daniel felt something like hope stir in his chest. How do I do that? By being honest about everything else. By showing her who you really are, not just telling her what you really own. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? Sure. What do you know about your sister's dreams? What she wanted before she had to take care of you? I know she wanted to be a doctor. I know she gave that up to raise me. And I know she pretends it doesn't matter, but it does. What would it mean to you if she had a chance to go back to school? Marcus looked at Daniel with sudden wariness. Why are you asking? Because I care about her happiness, and I want to understand what would make her life better. Mr. Morrison, Daniel, my sister doesn't need you to solve her problems. She needs you to respect her enough to let her make her own choices about her life. Even if I could help make those choices easier? Especially if you could help make those choices easier. Because if you try to buy your way back into her good graces, she'll never trust that your feelings for her are separate from your guilt about lying to her. Daniel realized that Marcus was giving him advice that could save his relationship with Destiny, if there was still a relationship to save. Marcus, will you do something for me? Depends what it is. Will you tell Destiny that I want to see her? Not to defend my choices or to make excuses, but to be completely honest about who I am and what I'm facing. And if she says no, then I'll respect her decision and try to die with some dignity, knowing that she taught me what authentic love feels like even if I ruin the chance to experience it fully. Marcus stood up to leave, then turned back to Daniel. Daniel, can I tell you something my sister said about you? What? She said that Tom Adams was the first person who ever made her feel like taking care of someone was a privilege instead of a responsibility. And now she's trying to figure out if Daniel Morrison could make her feel the same way. After Marcus left, Daniel lay in his hospital bed processing everything he'd learned. His condition was worsening rapidly. His real identity would soon be public knowledge. And the woman he loved was struggling to determine whether their relationship had been real or just an elaborate deception. But for the first time since revealing the truth, Daniel felt something that might have been hope. Because Marcus had made him understand that earning Destiny's forgiveness wasn't about proving he was worthy of love despite his wealth. It was about proving he was worthy of love because of who he chose to be with whatever time he had left. Even if that time was measured in days rather than weeks. Even if those days had to include telling her everything else he'd been hiding about his life, his family, and his fears about dying alone. Even if honesty meant risking the loss of the only person who'd ever made him want to be completely truthful about everything. Destiny stood outside room 314 for 20 minutes before finding the courage to knock. 3 days had passed since Daniel's revelation, 3 days of sleepless nights and conversations with Marcus that had left her more confused than certain about what she wanted to do. 3 days of missing someone who might not have been real in the first place. "Come in," Daniel's voice called, weaker than she remembered. When Destiny entered the room, she was shocked by the change in his appearance. The vibrant man who'd made her laugh while discussing Marcus's engineering dreams had been replaced by someone who looked fragile, exhausted, and genuinely close to death. "You look terrible," she said before she could stop herself. "Thank you for the medical assessment, Nurse Williams," Daniel replied with a ghost of his former smile. "I've missed your bedside manner." Despite everything, Destiny felt her heart clench at the warmth in his voice. Whatever else had been false, his appreciation for her presence seemed genuine. "Daniel, we need to talk." "I know. And I need to tell you some things I should have said from the beginning." Destiny sat down in the chair she'd occupied for 6 days, the chair that felt like hers even though she had no claim to it anymore. "Marcus came to see you." "He did. Your brother is remarkable, Destiny. He's wise in ways that make me understand why you sacrificed your dreams to raise him." "What did he tell you?" "He told me that you've been crying, which broke my heart because it meant I'd hurt the strongest person I've ever met. And he told me that I need to show you who Daniel Morrison really is, not just confess what Daniel Morrison owns." Destiny studied Daniel's face, seeing exhaustion and pain but also something that looked like hopeful determination. "So who is Daniel Morrison?" Daniel took a breath, wincing slightly as the movement triggered discomfort. "Daniel Morrison is someone who built a technology company because he wanted to solve problems that mattered. Someone who became wealthy almost by accident while trying to create software that would help hospitals coordinate patient care more effectively. The irony of which is not lost on me, given our current situation." "The irony is devastating," Daniel agreed. "Daniel Morrison is also someone who discovered that wealth attracts people who want to use you, which made him suspicious of everyone's motives. Someone who convinced himself that authentic relationships were impossible for people in his position. And someone who was wrong about that, because he met a nursing assistant who cared for him with extraordinary compassion without knowing anything about his financial status." Destiny felt tears threaten as she recognized the sincerity in Daniel's voice, but she couldn't let emotion override the legitimate questions she needed answered. "Daniel, why didn't you just come to this hospital as yourself? Why create an elaborate false identity?" "Because I've been in hospitals before as Daniel Morrison. Private rooms, teams of specialists, staff who treated me like a celebrity rather than a patient. I wanted to experience what it felt like to be cared for as a human being rather than as a source of potential donations. So you chose to be poor and anonymous rather than rich and recognized. I chose to be vulnerable and unknown rather than powerful and pursued. And what did you learn?" Daniel looked directly at Destiny, his eyes showing vulnerability that seemed impossible to fake. "I learned that you exist. I learned that someone could see value in me that had nothing to do with my wealth or status. I learned what it feels like to be loved for who I am instead of what I can provide." "Daniel, how do I know that any of this is real? How do I know you're not just a wealthy man who got bored and decided to play poor for a few weeks?" "Because I'm dying, Destiny. Because people who are facing death don't have energy for elaborate games or social experiments. Because everything I felt for you was desperate and honest in ways I've never experienced before." Destiny felt her resolve weaken as she saw tears in Daniel's eyes, but she forced herself to ask the question that had been tormenting her for 3 days. "If you hadn't been dying, would you ever have told me the truth?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and Destiny could see him considering whether to give her a comfortable lie or a difficult truth. "I don't know," he said finally. "I'd like to think I would have, but I can't promise that." I was so grateful to be loved authentically that I might have convinced myself the deception was worth maintaining. At least you're being honest now. I'm trying to be honest about everything now, even when honesty makes me look worse. Before Destiny could respond, commotion in the hallway interrupted their conversation. Voices, camera equipment being moved, and what sounded like hospital security dealing with an unexpected situation. Dr. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway looking frazzled. "Mr. Morrison, we have a problem. Somehow the media discovered your identity and location. There are news crews in the parking lot and reporters trying to access your floor." Daniel closed his eyes, understanding that his remaining time had just become infinitely more complicated. How did they find out? Unknown. But hospital administration needs to discuss transferring you to a private facility where your privacy can be better protected. "I don't want to be transferred. Sir, this hospital isn't equipped to handle the media attention your presence is generating." Destiny looked between Dr. Rodriguez and Daniel, processing the implications of what was happening. "Daniel, you need to go somewhere you can receive proper care without dealing with reporters and photographers." "I want to stay here. This is where you work, this is where we met, this is where I want to spend whatever time I have left." But the media attention will be disruptive for other patients and their families. Daniel looked at Destiny with an expression that was both pleading and resigned. "Destiny, what do you think I should do?" The question caught her off guard. After 3 days of feeling betrayed and confused, she hadn't expected Daniel to ask for her opinion about major decisions. "I think," she said carefully, "that you should prioritize your comfort and care over any other considerations. My comfort and care depend more on your presence than on expensive hospital rooms or private medical facilities." Dr. Rodriguez looked between them, clearly understanding that there were personal dynamics affecting medical decisions. "Mr. Morrison, Ms. Williams is no longer assigned to your case. Hospital policy prohibits personal relationships between staff and patients when financial complications are involved." "What financial complications?" Destiny asked. "Ms. Williams, you've been removed from Mr. Morrison's care team because of potential conflicts of interest related to his wealth and your personal involvement in his case." Destiny felt anger flare as she realized that Daniel's money was creating barriers to providing him with care, even though he was dying and needed support. That's ridiculous. He's a patient who needs nursing assistance, regardless of his bank account. It's hospital policy, and it's designed to protect both patients and staff from complications related to financial relationships. Daniel struggled to sit up in bed, his movement clearly causing pain but his expression showing determination. "Dr. Rodriguez, what if I made a formal request for Destiny to continue as my nursing assistant? What if I signed documents stating that there are no financial arrangements or expectations between us?" "Sir, hospital administration is concerned about the appearance of impropriety, especially given the media attention." "The appearance of impropriety? What's improper about a dying man wanting to be cared for by someone who's shown him extraordinary compassion?" Destiny watched this exchange, understanding that Daniel's wealth was simultaneously protecting him from some problems while creating others. "Daniel, maybe you should consider transferring to a private facility. You'd have more privacy, better accommodations, and specialists who focus specifically on palliative care. Would you come with me?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Destiny wasn't ready to process. "I work here, Daniel. I can't just leave my job to follow a patient to another facility. Even if that patient is someone you care about? Especially if that patient is someone I care about, because caring about you doesn't give me the luxury of making impulsive decisions about my career." Daniel nodded, accepting her response but clearly disappointed by it. "Dr. Rodriguez, what are my options for staying here while minimizing disruption to the hospital?" "Honestly, sir, I don't think there are good options. The media attention is only going to increase as word spreads about your condition and location. As if summoned by their conversation, Jenny appeared in the doorway carrying flowers, legal documents, and the kind of urgent efficiency that suggested she'd been dealing with crisis management all morning. "Mr. Morrison, I've been trying to reach you. The board is demanding an emergency meeting about succession planning. Your family has hired attorneys to contest your medical decisions, and 3 major news outlets are requesting exclusive interviews about your decision to seek treatment at a public hospital." Destiny watched Daniel's face change as the reality of his situation became clear. He wasn't just a dying patient anymore. He was a public figure whose medical choices had become newsworthy. "Jenny, I don't want to meet with the board, I don't want to deal with my family's legal challenges, and I definitely don't want to give interviews to reporters." "Sir, with respect, your preferences may not be legally enforceable if your family succeeds in having you declared mentally incompetent due to your medical condition." "They're trying to have me declared incompetent?" "Your brother filed papers this morning claiming that your decision to seek treatment under a false identity demonstrates impaired judgment that makes you unfit to manage your business interests." Destiny felt sick as she realized that Daniel's attempt to die with dignity was being challenged by family members who apparently cared more about inheritance than his well-being. "Daniel, can they actually do that? If they can convince a judge that cancer has affected my mental capacity, they can potentially gain control of my medical decisions as well as my business interests. Which means they could force me to receive treatment I don't want, in facilities I don't choose, surrounded by people whose motivations I don't trust." Jenny looked between Daniel and Destiny with the expression of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Sir, may I suggest a possible solution?" "What?" "You could marry Ms. Williams. Spouses have legal authority over medical decisions that supersedes family claims of incompetence." The suggestion hit the room like a bomb, creating silence that stretched for what felt like hours. "Jenny, I can't ask Destiny to marry me just to solve legal problems. And I can't marry someone I've known for less than 2 weeks, regardless of how I feel about them," Destiny added. "With respect," Jenny continued, "you've known each other for 9 days, you've spent more time together than most people do in months of dating, and you're facing a situation where emotional decisions might be the most practical ones." Daniel looked at Destiny with an expression that was both hopeful and terrified. "Destiny, what if we got married not because of legal complications, but because we want to spend whatever time I have left as committed partners?" "Daniel, you're asking me to make the biggest decision of my life while you're dying and while reporters are camped outside and while your family is challenging your mental competence. I'm asking you to make a decision based on whether you believe our feelings for each other are strong enough to build something meaningful in whatever time we have. And what about the fact that you lied to me about your identity for a week? What about the fact that I told you the truth when I could have maintained the lie until I died?" Destiny looked at Daniel, seeing someone who was simultaneously the most complicated and the most straightforward person she'd ever met. Someone whose wealth created endless complications but whose feelings seemed genuinely simple. "Daniel, if I said yes, what would that mean practically?" "It would mean you'd have legal authority to make medical decisions if I become unable to make them myself. It would mean my family couldn't force me into treatments or facilities I don't want. And it would mean we'd face whatever comes next as partners instead of as a patient and a nursing assistant. And financially? It would mean you'd inherit everything when I die, which is something I want regardless of whether we get married." Destiny felt the weight of what Daniel was offering, understanding that he was essentially proposing to give her his entire fortune along with his name. "Daniel, I can't accept your money. Even if accepting it means you could go back to school? Even if it means Marcus gets the education he deserves? Even if it means you never have to work 3 jobs just to survive? Especially then because accepting money changes the nature of every feeling between us. Or it removes financial stress so we can focus on what really matters between us." Before Destiny could respond, Dr. Rodriguez returned with news that made all their personal dilemmas seem secondary. Mr. Morrison, your condition has deteriorated significantly in the past few hours. We need to discuss transitioning to comfort care measures. What does that mean? It means we focus on pain management and dignity rather than attempting treatments that won't extend your life meaningfully. How long do I have? Perhaps 3 to 5 days. The room went silent as everyone processed what Dr. Rodriguez had just revealed. All of Daniel's legal problems, family conflicts, and media attention had become secondary to the fact that he was going to die within a week. "Destiny," Daniel said quietly, "I know this is overwhelming, and I know I have no right to ask anything of you after lying about who I was. But will you stay with me? Not as my wife, not as my nursing assistant, just as someone who cares about my well-being." Destiny looked at this man who'd shown her what it felt like to be appreciated, who'd lied to her about everything except his feelings, who was offering her his fortune and asking only for her presence during his final days. "Yes," she said, "I'll stay with you. Even with all the complications?" "Especially with all the complications, because facing difficulties together is what people do when they care about each other." As media crews gathered outside and family attorneys prepared legal challenges and hospital administrators debated policy implications, Daniel and Destiny held hands in room 314, understanding that their love story was going to be compressed into days rather than years, but that those days might contain more authentic connection than most people experienced in decades. "Daniel, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that whatever decisions we make in the next few days, we make them based on what we actually want, not on what other people think we should want." "I promise." "And Destiny?" "Yes. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for choosing to stay. Thank you for being brave enough to love someone whose situation is impossibly complicated. Thank you for being honest with me, even when honesty meant risking the only relationship that's ever mattered to you." As they prepared to face Daniel's final days together, neither of them mentioned the fact that their entire relationship would be public knowledge by morning, or that Daniel's family would fight to control his final decisions, or that loving someone who was dying required a kind of courage that most people never had to find. They focused on the fact that they'd found each other across impossible circumstances, and that whatever time they had left would be spent honestly, openly, and together. Sometimes the greatest love stories are the shortest ones. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that teach you what matters when everything else falls away. And sometimes choosing love means choosing heartbreak, knowing that the love is worth whatever pain comes with it. The chapel at Mercy General Hospital had seen thousands of prayers, but it had never hosted a billionaire's deathbed wedding. Daniel sat in a wheelchair, oxygen cannula in his nose, wearing the nicest clothes Jenny had been able to find in his size from the hospital gift shop. Destiny stood beside him in scrubs she'd borrowed from a friend, holding flowers that Marcus had picked from the hospital's courtyard garden. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, serving as their witness while Jenny handled the legal documentation. "I'm sure about her," Daniel said, looking at Destiny with eyes that were clear despite the morphine keeping his pain manageable. "I'm sure about us. Everything else is just paperwork." Destiny squeezed Daniel's hand, still processing the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Daniel's family had escalated their legal challenges, filing emergency injunctions to prevent him from making any financial decisions while mentally compromised by terminal illness. The media had discovered her identity and was camped outside her apartment. Hospital administration had demanded she take unpaid leave to avoid conflict of interest complications. And through it all, Daniel had made one thing clear: he wanted to marry her not because of legal protection or inheritance issues, but because he loved her and wanted whatever time they had left to be as honest and committed as possible. "The rings?" asked Father Miguel, the hospital chaplain who'd agreed to perform the ceremony. Jenny produced simple gold bands she'd purchased that morning. Daniel had insisted on basic rings rather than anything expensive, understanding that their symbolism mattered more than their monetary value. "Daniel Morrison," Father Miguel began, "do you take Destiny Williams to be your wife, to love and cherish in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Daniel said, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "And I promise to be honest with you about everything from this moment forward." "Destiny Williams, do you take Daniel Morrison to be your husband, to love and cherish in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" Destiny looked at Daniel, seeing past the wealth and the complications to the man who'd made her feel valued in ways she'd never experienced. Someone whose time was measured in days but whose love felt infinite. "I do," she said, "and I promise to stay with you through whatever comes next." As they exchanged rings, Destiny felt tears on her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but tears of something she'd never expected to experience. The joy of committing to someone completely, even when that commitment came with guaranteed heartbreak. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Daniel struggled to stand from his wheelchair, determined to kiss his new wife while standing even if it exhausted him. Destiny met him halfway, supporting his weight as they shared their first kiss as a married couple. "I love you, Mrs. Morrison," Daniel whispered. "I love you too, Mr. Morrison." Jenny documented everything for legal purposes, but also took photos that captured the genuine happiness on both their faces despite the gravity of their situation. The celebration was interrupted by commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, legal terminology, and what sounded like security personnel dealing with an unwelcome situation. "Mr. Morrison," a hospital administrator announced, entering the chapel with obvious reluctance, "your family's attorneys are here with a court order." Daniel's brother Michael appeared behind the administrator, accompanied by two lawyers and carrying paperwork that looked ominous. "Daniel, this wedding is invalid," Michael announced. "You're not mentally competent to enter into marriage contracts." "Hello, Michael. Congratulations on timing your legal assault to coincide with my wedding ceremony." "This isn't a legal assault. This is protecting you from making decisions that compromise your medical care and financial security." "Protecting me or protecting your inheritance?" Michael's lawyers stepped forward with the efficient coldness that suggested they'd handled similar family disputes before. "Mr. Morrison, we have court orders requiring psychological evaluation before any marriage licenses can be finalized. We also have injunctions preventing any transfers of assets or changes to medical decision-making authority." Destiny felt the happiness of the past hour evaporate as she realized that Daniel's family was prepared to use legal warfare to control his final days. "On what grounds?" Jenny demanded, reviewing the court documents. "On the grounds that terminal illness affects cognitive capacity, and that entering into marriage with someone he's known for 2 weeks suggests impaired judgment." Daniel struggled back into his wheelchair, the exertion of standing for the ceremony having drained his energy reserves. "Michael, how long have you been planning this?" "Since you disappeared 2 weeks ago and we discovered you'd been living under a false identity in a public hospital. Your behavior has been erratic and concerning." "My behavior has been an attempt to experience authentic human connection before I die." "Your behavior has been the actions of someone whose judgment has been compromised by medical treatment and emotional distress." Destiny watched this exchange, understanding that she was witnessing a family destroying itself over money while someone they claimed to love was dying in front of them. "Mr. Morrison," one of the lawyers said, "we're prepared to arrange transfer to a private medical facility where you can receive appropriate palliative care without the distractions that have interfered with rational decision-making." "The distractions being my wife?" "The distractions being involvement with individuals whose motivations may not align with your best interests." Daniel looked at Michael with an expression that was both heartbroken and furious. "Michael, do you actually believe that Destiny married me for money?" Do you think someone who works 3 jobs to support her teenage brother is the kind of person who manipulates dying billionaires? I think people in desperate financial situations sometimes make choices they wouldn't normally consider. And I think family members who've never shown interest in my well-being sometimes become very concerned about my welfare when inheritance is involved. The confrontation was interrupted by Dr. Rodriguez, who appeared with medical equipment and an expression of urgent concern. "Mr. Morrison, I need to examine you immediately. Your vital signs have become irregular, and I'm concerned about cardiac complications." As medical staff surrounded Daniel, checking his heart rhythm and blood pressure, Destiny realized that the stress of legal battles and family conflict was literally threatening his life. "Everyone out," Dr. Rodriguez ordered. "Mr. Morrison needs medical attention, not legal arguments." "Doctor, we have court orders that supersede hospital policies," Michael's lawyer insisted. "And I have medical ethics that supersede court orders. This patient is in cardiac distress, and I'm clearing this room of everyone who isn't essential to his immediate care." As lawyers and family members were escorted out, Destiny remained beside Daniel's wheelchair, holding his hand while medical staff worked to stabilize his condition. "Daniel, stay with me," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere without you," he replied, though his voice was weaker than it had been during the ceremony. For the next hour, Destiny watched medical professionals work to counteract the physical effects of emotional stress on Daniel's failing body. His blood pressure stabilized, his heart rhythm returned to normal, but the episode had clearly accelerated his overall decline. "How much time do we have?" Destiny asked Dr. Rodriguez when they were alone. Honestly, the stress of these legal battles could trigger complications that shorten his remaining time significantly. He needs peace, quiet, and the emotional support that helps terminal patients maintain dignity during their final days. And instead he's dealing with lawyers and family members who are treating his deathbed like a business negotiation. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to understand something about terminal care. The most important factor in patient comfort isn't medical treatment, it's emotional environment. Patients who feel loved and supported often have more peaceful deaths than patients who receive superior medical care but experience interpersonal conflict." Destiny processed what Dr. Rodriguez was telling her, understanding that her presence in Daniel's life wasn't just emotionally meaningful, it was medically beneficial. "What can I do to help him?" "Be present. Be calm. Help him focus on what matters rather than what other people think should matter." Even if his family continues their legal challenges? Especially if his family continues their legal challenges. Because legal outcomes won't matter to him in 3 days, but your presence will matter until his final moment. When Daniel woke up from the sedation that had been necessary to stabilize his cardiac episode, the first thing he saw was Destiny sleeping in the chair beside his bed, still wearing her borrowed scrubs and makeshift wedding flowers. "Hey, beautiful wife," he whispered. Destiny woke immediately, trained by years of caring for Marcus to respond to subtle sounds. "How are you feeling?" "Like I married the most remarkable woman in the world and then immediately subjected her to the worst family drama imaginable." "Daniel, are you regretting the marriage?" "I'm regretting that my family is treating our marriage like a financial transaction instead of recognizing that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Destiny climbed into the hospital bed beside Daniel, careful not to disturb his 4 lines or monitoring equipment. "What do we do about the legal challenges?" "We ignore them. We focus on each other, on whatever time we have left, on making sure that these last few days are about love rather than lawyers." "Can we do that? Can we just ignore court orders and family pressure?" "Destiny, I'm going to die within the week regardless of what any judge or lawyer or family member decides. The only thing that matters is whether I die feeling loved and whether you know how much you've meant to me." "And what about your fortune? What about Michael's inheritance claims?" Daniel reached for paperwork Jenny had left beside his bed, documents that had been prepared while he was unconscious. I've transferred everything to a trust that will provide for you and Marcus while funding medical research and educational scholarships. Michael gets a comfortable inheritance, but not control over the foundation that will continue our work. Daniel, I told you I don't want your money. And I told you that what you want and what I want to give you are two different things. This isn't about buying your love or creating obligations. This is about ensuring that the woman who showed me what authentic care looks like never has to work 3 jobs just to survive. Destiny felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Daniel was offering, but also by the genuine love that motivated his generosity. What if I can't handle being responsible for that kind of wealth? Then you'll hire people who can help you manage it responsibly. But Destiny, you've been making life-changing decisions about someone else's welfare since you were 22. You've been managing resources and planning for the future and putting someone else's needs ahead of your own for years. That's different. That was taking care of Marcus. This is taking care of hundreds of Marcus's, students who need scholarships, patients who need medical research, families who need the kind of support systems you never had. Destiny realized that Daniel was asking her to see his wealth not as personal luxury, but as a tool for helping people whose situations resembled her own struggles. You want me to use your money to help other people. I want you to use our money to help other people. Because everything I have becomes yours when I die, and I trust you to do meaningful things with resources that I never used as thoughtfully as I should have. Daniel, what if I'm not strong enough to handle losing you and inheriting a fortune and managing a foundation all at the same time? Daniel turned to face Destiny fully, ignoring the discomfort the movement caused. Destiny, you raised a brilliant teenager while working multiple jobs and mourning your parents and never losing your capacity for kindness. You cared for dying strangers with compassion that made them feel valued. You fell in love with someone who lied to you about his identity and found the courage to forgive him. And if that's not strength enough to handle whatever comes next, then strength doesn't exist. As they held each other in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitoring equipment and legal documents and the evidence of a life that was ending, Destiny realized that her relationship with Daniel had taught her something profound about love and loss. Loving someone who was dying didn't mean protecting yourself from heartbreak. It meant opening your heart completely, knowing that loss was inevitable, because the love was worth whatever pain came with it. And sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was the promise that their love would outlast their life, that the care they'd shown would continue helping people long after they were gone. Daniel, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when you die, you'll know that you were loved completely. Not for your money, not for your status, not for what you could provide, but for who you chose to be with the time you had. I promise. And Destiny? Yes. Promise me that when I'm gone, you'll remember that loving you was the most meaningful thing I ever did with my life. I promise. As they prepared to face whatever legal challenges and family conflicts awaited them, Daniel and Destiny held each other with the certainty that their love was real, their marriage was meaningful, and their commitment to each other would survive whatever attempts were made to diminish or destroy it. Because some love stories are about finding each other across impossible circumstances. And some love stories are about choosing each other despite knowing that the choice comes with guaranteed heartbreak. But the greatest love stories are about discovering that love creates more love, that caring for one person teaches you to care for everyone, and that the most powerful legacy you can leave is proof that authentic connection is possible even when everything else seems impossible. Daniel died for 4 minutes on their second day of marriage. Destiny was holding his hand, reading him Marcus's latest college acceptance letter, when the monitors started screaming. His heart stopped. His breathing ceased, and for 4 endless minutes, she watched medical staff work to bring back the man she'd just promised to love until death. When his heartbeat returned, when his eyes opened and found hers, Daniel's first words were, "Did I miss anything important?" "Just Marcus getting into MIT with a full scholarship," Destiny said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the terror she'd just experienced. "That's wonderful news. Tell him I'm proud of him." But they both understood what the cardiac arrest meant. Daniel's body was shutting down faster than anyone had predicted. Dr. Rodriguez estimated hours rather than days. "How long do we have?" Destiny asked when they were alone. "Maybe until tomorrow morning. Maybe less." "Are you in pain?" "Not physical pain. But I'm scared, Destiny. I'm scared of leaving you alone to deal with my family and the foundation and all the complications I've created." Destiny climbed back into the hospital bed, carefully avoiding the additional monitoring equipment that had been attached after his cardiac episode. "I'm scared too. But not of your family or your money or any of those external things." "What are you scared of?" "I'm scared of forgetting what your voice sounds like. I'm scared of not being able to remember exactly how it feels when you hold my hand. I'm scared that after you're gone, I'll start doubting whether what we had was real." Daniel struggled to turn toward her, his movement requiring assistance but his need to face her overriding physical limitations. "Destiny, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when you doubt whether our love was real, you'll remember this conversation. You'll remember that I chose to spend my last conscious hours talking to you about what matters instead of reviewing business documents or settling family disputes. I promise. And promise me that you'll use the resources I'm leaving you to help people who are facing situations like you and Marcus faced. Promise me that my money will make sure other families don't have to choose between dreams and survival. I promise. But Daniel, I need you to promise me something too." "What?" "Promise me that you'll know, when you die, that you lived a meaningful life. Not because of your business success or your wealth, but because you chose love over fear when it mattered most." "I promise." They were interrupted by Jenny, who appeared with legal documents that required immediate attention. "Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there are inheritance issues that need resolution before." "Before I die," Daniel finished. "It's okay to say the words, Jenny. Your brother has filed additional challenges that could tie up the foundation's assets for years unless we complete certain transfers immediately." Daniel looked at the paperwork, then at Destiny, then back at Jenny. "What specifically does Michael want?" "Control of the company, access to liquid assets, and the right to challenge your marriage on grounds of diminished capacity." "And what happens if I don't sign these documents?" "Your wishes regarding the foundation could be overturned, Ms. Williams could be left with nothing, and your brother could gain control of resources you intended for charitable purposes." Destiny watched Daniel process this information, understanding that his family was essentially holding his legacy hostage to force compliance with their demands. "What if I sign everything over to Destiny right now? Complete transfer, no foundation, no trust, just direct inheritance. That would protect your wishes, but it would also make Ms. Williams personally responsible for managing $4.2 billion in assets." "Jenny, can I have a moment alone with my wife?" After Jenny left, Daniel turned to Destiny with an expression that was both apologetic and determined. "I need to ask you to make an impossible choice." "What choice?" "I can transfer everything to you right now, which protects my wishes but gives you sole responsibility for my entire fortune. Or I can compromise with Michael, which protects you from that responsibility but means some of my money goes to people who will use it selfishly." Destiny felt the weight of what Daniel was asking her to decide. "How much money are we talking about?" $4.2 billion. Plus real estate, investments, art collections, and business interests that generate approximately $200 million annually. "Daniel, I can't be responsible for that kind of wealth. You've been responsible for someone else's entire future since you were 22. You've made life-changing decisions about education, careers, and family welfare for 4 years. That was different. That was one person I loved. This is thousands of people you could help. Students like Marcus who need scholarships. Families like yours who need medical support. Hospitals like this one that need funding for patient care. Destiny realized that Daniel was asking her to see his wealth as a tool for helping others rather than as personal luxury or responsibility. What if I make mistakes? What if I use the money badly? Then you'll learn from the mistakes and do better next time. But Destiny, doing nothing with resources that could help people is worse than making imperfect attempts to use them meaningfully. And what about Michael? What about your family? My family will receive enough money to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. They just won't receive control over resources they'd use to accumulate more wealth rather than helping people who need support. Before Destiny could respond, Michael appeared in the doorway with lawyers and what looked like court documents. Daniel, we need to resolve these inheritance issues immediately. Hello, Michael. Nice to see you're still prioritizing money over spending time with your dying brother. I'm prioritizing protecting your legacy from decisions made under emotional distress. My legacy is helping people who need help. Your priority is protecting your inheritance from charitable giving. Michael's lawyers stepped forward with the efficient coldness that had characterized all their interactions. Mr. Morrison, we have court orders requiring immediate resolution of asset transfers. Your medical condition makes prolonged legal proceedings impossible. Which means you're using my impending death to force decisions that benefit you rather than the causes I care about. Which means we're ensuring that assets worth billions of dollars are managed responsibly rather than given away impulsively. Daniel looked at Destiny, seeing someone whose strength and character had convinced him that his fortune would be used more meaningfully by her than by his family. Destiny, are you willing to accept complete responsibility for my estate? The question hung in the air like a challenge, loaded with implications that would affect thousands of lives and test everything Destiny believed about herself and her capabilities. Daniel, I need to ask you something first. What? If you weren't dying if we had years together, would you still want me to inherit everything? I would want us to decide together how to use our resources to help people. But yes, I would want you to have equal say in how our money was used. And you believe I'm capable of making those decisions responsibly? I believe you're the most ethical person I've ever met, and that ethics matter more than experience when you're managing resources that affect other people's lives. Destiny looked around the hospital room where she'd fallen in love with someone who'd taught her that wealth could be a tool for caring rather than just a source of comfort. Yes, she said, I'll accept responsibility for your estate. Michael's face went white with anger. This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision-making that proves Daniel's mental incompetence. This is exactly the kind of thoughtful decision-making that proves he's choosing his values over your greed, Destiny replied. Jenny began preparing transfer documents while Michael's lawyers threatened additional legal challenges. Mr. Morrison, transferring your entire estate to someone you've known for 2 weeks is grounds for having the transaction declared invalid. Transferring my estate to someone who's shown extraordinary character under impossible circumstances is grounds for believing it will be used meaningfully. As legal battles escalated around his deathbed, Daniel's condition continued deteriorating. His breathing became labored, his energy faded, and his ability to participate in conversations diminished dramatically. Everyone out except Destiny, Dr. Rodriguez ordered. This patient needs peace, not legal arguments. Doctor, we have court orders that supersede medical preferences, Michael insisted. And I have medical ethics that supersede court orders. This man is dying, and he deserves to die with dignity rather than surrounded by people fighting over his money. As lawyers and family members were escorted from the room, Destiny remained beside Daniel's bed, holding his hand while his breathing grew increasingly shallow. Are you okay with the decision we made? Daniel asked weakly. I'm terrified of the decision we made. But I'm proud of it too. Why proud? Because we chose to trust each other completely, even when the stakes were impossibly high. Destiny, I need to tell you something while I still can. What? These past 2 weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Not because I'm dying and you made death easier, but because you showed me what it means to be loved for who I am instead of what I have. Daniel, you need to know that loving you has taught me things about myself I never knew. Like what? Like I'm braver than I thought. Like I'm capable of making bigger decisions than I believed. Like I can love someone completely even when I know that love comes with guaranteed heartbreak. And you don't regret any of it? I regret that we didn't have more time. I regret that your family made your final days more difficult than they should have been. But I don't regret loving you, marrying you, or accepting the responsibility for continuing your work. Daniel smiled, the expression requiring effort but showing genuine happiness. Destiny, what will you do first? With the foundation, with the money, with all the possibilities. I'll make sure Marcus gets the education he deserves. I'll go back to school and finish my medical degree. And I'll use your resources to create programs that help other families facing the choices we faced. That sounds perfect. What about you? Is there anything else you need to say or do? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his breathing slow and difficult. I need you to know that meeting you was worth everything. The deception, the complications, the family conflicts, the pain of leaving you, all of it was worth experiencing what real love feels like. I need you to know that you saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with money. You showed me what it means to be valued, appreciated, and loved completely. As the sun set outside the hospital room window, Daniel and Destiny held each other with the knowledge that their time together was measured in hours rather than days. Destiny, will you tell me about your dreams? About what you want to accomplish with your life? For the next few hours, as Daniel's condition stabilized briefly before his final decline, Destiny told him about her plans for medical school, her ideas for using his foundation to help families facing medical crises, her hopes for Marcus's future, and her commitment to living a life that honored the love they'd shared. You're going to change so many lives, Daniel said weakly. We're going to change so many lives. Because everything meaningful I accomplish will be built on what you taught me about courage and love and using resources to help others. I love you, Mrs. Morrison. I love you too, Mr. Morrison. At 3:17 a.m. on their third day of marriage, Daniel Morrison died peacefully in Destiny's arms, his last words being her name and his final expression one of complete contentment. The nurses found them an hour later, Destiny still holding her husband's hand, tears on her cheeks but a sense of peace in her expression that suggested she understood exactly how meaningful their brief time together had been. Outside the hospital room, Michael and his lawyers were preparing additional legal challenges. But inside the room, Destiny Morrison sat beside the man who'd taught her that love creates more love, that wealth can be a tool for caring, and that sometimes the most important relationships are the ones that teach you who you're capable of becoming. Daniel was gone. But everything he'd loved about life would continue through the woman he'd chosen to carry his legacy forward. And that, Destiny realized, was the most beautiful kind of immortality possible. The funeral was everything Daniel would have hated. Destiny sat in the front pew of the most expensive church in the city, wearing black Chanel that Jenny had insisted was appropriate for a billionaire's widow, surrounded by hundreds of people who'd never spoken to Daniel while he was alive but who wanted to be seen mourning his death. The eulogy was delivered by a business associate who described Daniel's visionary leadership and unprecedented success in creating shareholder value, never once mentioning his compassion, his humor, or the fact that he'd spent his final days trying to use his wealth to help others. He was a titan of industry, the speaker concluded, whose legacy will be measured in the enterprises he built and the wealth he created. Destiny felt sick listening to this sanitized version of the man she'd married, this corporate hagiography that erased everything authentic about who Daniel had been. When the service ended, Michael approached her with lawyers and an expression that suggested the real battle was about to begin. Destiny, we need to discuss the estate immediately. We need to bury your brother first. The funeral is finished. The legal complications aren't. Michael, Daniel died 3 days ago. Can't this wait until after the burial? Financial markets don't wait for grief, and neither do legal deadlines. We have documents that require your signature today. Destiny looked around at the crowd of mourners who were already moving toward their cars, their obligation to appear respectful having been fulfilled. Daniel was about to be buried, and his brother was treating the occasion like a business meeting. What documents? Papers transferring control of the foundation to professional management, agreements limiting your access to liquid assets until competency evaluations are completed, and modifications to Daniel's will that reflect realistic assessments of appropriate inheritance levels. In other words, documents that undo everything Daniel wanted. Documents that protect everyone involved from the consequences of decisions made under extreme emotional distress. Destiny felt anger replace grief as she realized that Michael was using Daniel's death as an opportunity to seize control of resources Daniel had specifically wanted used for charitable purposes. I'm not signing anything today. Then you'll be in violation of court orders that require immediate resolution of estate issues. Then I'll deal with court orders. But I won't dishonor Daniel's memory by treating his funeral like a business transaction. As the confrontation escalated, Marcus appeared beside Destiny with an expression that suggested he'd been listening to the entire exchange. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus said to Michael, "with respect, your brother just died. Maybe legal documents can wait until after you've actually buried him." "Young man, this doesn't concern you. Actually, it does concern me. Because Destiny is my sister, Daniel was my brother-in-law, and the foundation he created is going to fund my education and help other students like me." Michael's lawyers looked uncomfortable with the public nature of the discussion, but Michael himself seemed determined to force immediate resolution. "Ms. Williams, and I don't recognize your marriage to my brother as legally valid. You have no experience managing large-scale financial operations. Transferring billions of dollars to someone with your background is irresponsible and potentially illegal. My background includes 4 years of managing complex family responsibilities under financial pressure." Daniel believed that experience was more relevant than MBA credentials. "Your background includes working as a nursing assistant. That's not qualification for managing a charitable foundation worth billions of dollars." Before Destiny could respond, Dr. Rodriguez appeared with an expression that suggested he'd heard enough of the conversation to form strong opinions about it. "Mr. Morrison, I treated your brother during his final weeks. I watched him make careful, thoughtful decisions about his estate while mentally alert and emotionally stable. Doctor, my brother was dying of cancer and taking pain medication that affects cognitive function. Your brother was receiving palliative care that allowed him to think clearly about his priorities and values. His decision to trust his wife with his legacy was consistent with everything he expressed about wanting to help vulnerable populations. His decision to marry someone he'd known for 2 weeks was consistent with impaired judgment caused by terminal illness." Destiny felt tears threaten as she listened to Michael dismiss her marriage as a symptom of disease rather than a choice made by someone who'd found authentic love. "Michael, Daniel married me because he loved me. He left me his fortune because he trusted me to use it meaningfully. If you can't accept that, then you never understood your brother at all. I understood that my brother was worth $4.2 billion, and that transferring that wealth to someone with no legal or financial training puts charitable resources at risk. You understood that your brother was worth money. You never understood that he was worth loving." The accusation hung in the air between them, crystallizing the fundamental difference in how they'd seen Daniel and what they believed mattered about his life. Jenny approached with paperwork that looked official and urgent. "Mrs. Morrison, there are media requests that need immediate attention. foundation board meetings that require your presence, and investment decisions that can't be delayed without significant financial consequences. Destiny felt overwhelmed by the scope of responsibilities that had fallen to her 3 days after her husband's death. "Jenny, I don't know how to handle board meetings or investment decisions." "You'll learn. And until you do, you'll have advisors who can help you make informed choices." "But what if I make mistakes? What if I lose money that could have helped people?" "Then you'll learn from the mistakes and do better next time." "But Mrs. Morrison, doing nothing with resources that could help people is worse than making imperfect attempts to use them meaningfully." Destiny realized that Jenny was echoing Daniel's words from their final conversation, reminding her that he trusted her with his fortune not because she was qualified, but because she cared about using it responsibly. "What happens if I refuse to take control of the foundation? What if I let Michael manage everything? Then Daniel's wishes are ignored, charitable programs are discontinued, and resources intended to help vulnerable populations get redirected to accumulate more wealth for people who are already wealthy. And what happens if I accept responsibility for managing $4.2 billion when I've never managed anything larger than a household budget?" Then you surround yourself with people who can teach you what you need to know, and you make decisions based on the values Daniel believed you shared. Michael had been listening to this exchange with growing impatience. This conversation is pointless. Destiny doesn't have legal authority to make unilateral decisions about the estate until court proceedings are resolved. "Actually," Jenny said, producing documents from her briefcase, "she does have that authority. As Daniel's wife and designated heir, Mrs. Morrison has complete legal control over all assets effective immediately upon his death. We're challenging that will on grounds of mental incompetence. You're challenging a will that was written by competent legal counsel, reviewed by multiple attorneys, and executed by someone who was mentally alert and emotionally stable. We're challenging a will that transfers billions of dollars to someone who married my brother under questionable circumstances." Destiny felt exhausted by the legal maneuvering and family conflict that was overshadowing Daniel's death and complicating her grief. "Michael, what would convince you that my marriage to Daniel was genuine? What would prove to you that he trusted me with his legacy for valid reasons?" "Nothing would convince me of that, because I don't believe relationships that develop that quickly under those circumstances can be authentic." "Then you don't understand love, loss, or what matters to people who are facing death. And you don't understand wealth, responsibility, or the complexities of managing charitable foundations." "You're right. I don't understand those things yet. But I understand caring about people, making sacrifices for family, and working to help others even when it's difficult. Understanding those things doesn't qualify you to manage billions of dollars." "Maybe not. But understanding those things qualifies me to want to learn how to manage billions of dollars responsibly." Dr. Rodriguez had been listening to this exchange with growing frustration. "Mr. Morrison, I need to tell you something about your brother's final days." "What?" "He was happier during his last 2 weeks than I've ever seen a terminal patient. Not because he was avoiding reality about his condition, but because he'd found someone who made him feel valued for who he was rather than what he owned." "That's a nice sentiment, doctor, but it doesn't change the legal realities of estate management. It changes the moral realities of respecting someone's final wishes. Your brother died knowing that his wife would use his resources to help people facing situations like she'd faced. Honoring that wish seems more important than protecting wealth from charitable giving." As they prepared to leave the church for the burial, Destiny realized that she was facing a choice that would define not just her future, but the future of everyone who could benefit from Daniel's foundation. She could compromise with Michael, accepting professional management that would preserve wealth while limiting charitable impact. Or she could fight for Daniel's vision, accepting full responsibility for resources she felt unprepared to manage but committed to using meaningfully. "Michael, I want to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" I'll accept professional advisors for the foundation's management, but I retain final authority over charitable giving decisions. You receive a significant inheritance, but not control over resources Daniel wanted used for philanthropy. That's not acceptable. Professional management means professional authority, not advice that you can ignore. Then we'll let the courts decide whether Daniel's wishes or your financial concerns take priority. Courts will recognize that transferring billions of dollars to someone with no relevant experience is irresponsible regardless of emotional motivations. Courts will recognize that Daniel was mentally competent when he made these decisions, and that challenging them is motivated by greed rather than concern for charitable effectiveness. As they drove to the cemetery, Destiny sat between Marcus and Jenny, processing the weight of what she'd committed to fight for. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked. "I'm sure about Daniel's values. I'm sure about wanting to honor his memory. I'm sure about believing that wealth should help people rather than just accumulate more wealth." "And what about being responsible for $4.2 billion? I'm terrified of being responsible for $4.2 billion. But I'm more terrified of letting it be used for purposes Daniel would have opposed." At the graveside, as Daniel's casket was lowered into the ground, Destiny made a silent promise to the man who'd taught her that love creates more love and that caring for one person can teach you to care for everyone. She promised to learn everything necessary to manage his foundation responsibly. She promised to use his resources to help families facing the struggles she and Marcus had faced. She promised to honor his memory by becoming the kind of person who could carry his legacy forward meaningfully. And she promised to remember that the greatest gift of their brief marriage wasn't the wealth he'd left her, but the confidence he'd given her to believe she was capable of extraordinary things. As mourners dispersed and legal battles loomed, Destiny stood beside Daniel's grave, understanding that losing him had broken her heart, but that loving him had taught her who she was capable of becoming. The fight for his foundation would be difficult. Learning to manage billions of dollars would be overwhelming. Navigating life as a billionaire widow would be complicated in ways she couldn't imagine. But she'd face all of it knowing that Daniel had seen something in her that she was just beginning to see in herself: the strength to carry love forward, the courage to help others, and the wisdom to use resources meaningfully rather than just accumulating more wealth. "I love you," she whispered to the fresh grave, "and I promise to make you proud of the woman you helped me become." 2 years later, Dr. Destiny Morrison stood in the lobby of the Daniel Morrison Medical Center, watching families receive news that would change their lives forever. The 22-year-old mother clutching discharge papers that showed her son's leukemia treatment was fully funded. The elderly man whose experimental therapy was being covered by foundation grants. The teenager whose college scholarship would let him become the first person in his family to attend university. All of them receiving help that existed because a dying billionaire had fallen in love with a nursing assistant and trusted her to continue caring for people after he was gone. "Dr. Morrison, the board meeting is ready to begin," Jenny announced, appearing beside Destiny with the kind of efficient warmth that had made their working relationship both productive and meaningful. Destiny still felt surprise when people called her Dr. Morrison. 2 years of medical school completed through accelerated programs, internship rotations at the Foundation's partner hospitals, and specialized training in healthcare administration. She was now qualified both medically and legally to oversee the charitable foundation that bore Daniel's name. How many applications are we reviewing today? 437. Scholarship requests, medical funding appeals, and proposals for new community health programs. And our budget for this quarter? $60 million available for immediate distribution. The Foundation's endowment continues generating approximately $200 million annually, so we're well within sustainable giving limits. Destiny paused outside the boardroom, still processing the scope of resources she was responsible for managing. 2 years of experience had taught her how to evaluate proposals, coordinate with partner organizations, and measure impact effectiveness. But she still felt amazed by the power to change lives with phone calls and signature approvals. Jenny, do you think Daniel would be proud of what we've accomplished? Dr. Morrison, I think Daniel would be overwhelmed by how much more effective the foundation is under your leadership than it ever could have been under traditional professional management. What makes you say that? Because you make decisions based on who needs help rather than what generates positive publicity. Because you've created programs that address problems you understand personally rather than issues that look good in annual reports. Destiny nodded, understanding that her background as someone who'd struggled financially and sacrificed educational opportunities had actually made her more effective at identifying meaningful charitable programs. The boardroom was filled with people who'd become both colleagues and friends over the past 2 years. Medical professionals, education advocates, community organizers, and financial advisors who'd taught Destiny how to translate compassion into systematic change. First item, Destiny announced, is the expansion of our medical debt forgiveness program. The program had grown from her personal experience watching families destroy their financial futures to pay for medical care. In 2 years, the foundation had eliminated medical debt for over 3,000 families, allowing them to rebuild savings and invest in education rather than servicing healthcare loans. We've received 1,247 applications this quarter, reported Sarah Kim, the program director. Average debt forgiveness amount is $43,000 per family. Impact assessment? 91% of families report improved financial stability within 6 months. 67% have been able to pursue educational opportunities that were previously financially impossible. Destiny felt the familiar satisfaction that came from seeing systematic solutions address problems she'd experienced personally. Every family freed from medical debt was someone who could pursue dreams rather than just manage survival. Approved. What's the total budget impact? $53 million annually. Well within our sustainable giving parameters. Second item is the Education Equity Initiative. This program had grown from Marcus's experience applying to colleges while she worked multiple jobs to afford application fees. The foundation now provided comprehensive support for first-generation college students, application assistance, SAT preparation, scholarship funding, and mentorship programs. We're currently supporting 2,891 students across 47 states, reported David Chin, the education director. Graduation rate is 94%, significantly higher than national averages for students from similar economic backgrounds. And employment outcomes? 88% employed in their field of study within 6 months of graduation. Average starting salary is $63,000, representing a 340% increase over their family's median income. Destiny thought about Marcus, now in his junior year at MIT studying civil engineering, planning bridges and buildings that would serve communities for generations. The foundation was creating thousands of similar success stories, students whose talents had been recognized and supported rather than lost to financial barriers. Third item is the Community Health Program. This initiative had emerged from Destiny's medical training and her understanding of how healthcare access affected family stability. The foundation funded community clinics, mobile health services, and preventive care programs in underserved areas. We've established 37 community health centers in the past 18 months, reported Dr. Martinez, who coordinated medical programs. These centers have provided care for over 100,000 patients who previously lacked access to basic health care. Patient satisfaction rates? 96%. More importantly, we're seeing significant improvements in preventive care utilization and early intervention for chronic conditions. Destiny understood that community health programs created ripple effects throughout families and neighborhoods. Parents who received preventive care could continue working and supporting their children's education. Children who received early medical intervention could focus on learning rather than managing untreated health problems. Fourth item is the Emergency Assistance Fund. This program addressed situations like the one that had led to Destiny's own homelessness, sudden medical expenses, job loss, or family crises that destroyed financial stability despite responsible planning. We've provided emergency assistance to 6,847 families this year, reported Lisa Wong, who managed crisis interventions. Average assistance amount is $12,000 per family, typically preventing eviction, utility disconnection, or other housing instability. Follow-up outcomes? 81% of families stabilize their housing situation within 3 months. 73% report improved employment status within 6 months. Destiny realized that emergency assistance programs were essentially creating the safety net that she and Marcus had never had when their parents died and medical bills consumed their savings. As the board meeting continued, reviewing dozens of programs that addressed poverty, education barriers, healthcare access, and family stability, Destiny felt the weight and privilege of continuing Daniel's work. But she also felt something Daniel had probably never experienced: the joy of seeing systematic change create individual success stories, the satisfaction of knowing that her decisions were helping people build better lives rather than just managing crises. After the meeting, Destiny walked through the medical center that bore Daniel's name, visiting patients whose treatment was funded by foundation grants. Dr. Morrison called out Maria Santos, a 44-year-old teacher whose breast cancer treatment was being covered by the Foundation's Medical Assistance Program. "I wanted to thank you again for making my treatment possible." "How are you feeling, Maria?" "Strong. Hopeful. Like I'm going to see my daughter graduate from college next year." "That's wonderful news." "Dr. Morrison, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "What made you decide to focus the foundation on helping families like mine? What made you understand what people in situations like this actually need?" Destiny looked at Maria, seeing someone whose strength and determination reminded her of her own journey through financial crisis and family responsibility. "Because I've been where you are, Maria. Not medically, but financially. I've faced the choice between dreams and survival, between personal goals and family obligations. The foundation exists to make sure people don't have to make those choices alone." "And your husband? Did he understand those struggles too?" Destiny felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever someone mentioned Daniel. 2 years hadn't diminished the grief, but it had taught her how to carry loss while continuing to build the life he'd believed she was capable of living. "My husband understood that people's circumstances don't determine their worth. He believed that everyone deserves opportunities to build meaningful lives, regardless of their economic starting point." "He sounds like he was a remarkable man." "He was. And Maria? He would be proud to know that his foundation helped you continue teaching and raising your daughter. That's exactly what he hoped his money would accomplish." That evening, Destiny returned to the apartment she'd kept in the same neighborhood where she'd met Daniel. Not because she couldn't afford something larger, but because living near the hospital where they'd fallen in love felt like maintaining connection to the person he'd been rather than just the fortune he'd left her. Marcus called while she was reviewing foundation reports, his voice excited with news about his engineering internship and plans for graduate school. "Destiny, I got the research position with the infrastructure development team. We're going to be designing bridges for communities that have been isolated by geographic barriers." "That's incredible, Marcus. I'm so proud of you. I've been thinking about something though." "What?" "About how lucky we were that Daniel saw potential in our family. About how many other families are facing the same struggles we faced, but without access to the kind of support his foundation provides. And I want to make sure that when I'm established in my career, I continue expanding the foundation's work. Maybe focusing on infrastructure projects that connect underserved communities to educational and economic opportunities." Destiny felt tears in her eyes as she realized that Marcus had internalized the same values that had motivated Daniel's philanthropy, using resources and talents to help others rather than just accumulating personal wealth. Marcus, Daniel would love knowing that you're planning to carry his work forward. I'm planning to carry our family's work forward. Because what you've built with the foundation isn't just Daniel's legacy. It's proof of what you've always been capable of accomplishing. After they hung up, Destiny sat in her living room looking at photos from the past 2 years. Foundation events, medical center openings, scholarship award ceremonies, and community health program launches. In every photo, she could see her own transformation from someone who'd been overwhelmed by responsibility to someone who'd grown into leadership that felt natural and meaningful. But she could also see Daniel's influence in every program the foundation supported, every family they'd helped, every student whose education they'd funded. His love had created more love, exactly as he'd hoped. Before bed, Destiny walked to the small memorial garden she'd created on her apartment's balcony. Flowers that reminded her of the ones Daniel had received during his final days, plants that required daily care and attention, living things that grew stronger with consistent nurturing. "I hope you're proud of what we've accomplished," she said to the flowers, and the memory of the man who'd taught her that love's greatest gift wasn't being loved, but learning to love others more fully. The foundation helped 127,000 people this year. Marcus is going to be an engineer who builds bridges. I'm a doctor who understands both medicine and management. And I finally believe what you always said, that I was capable of extraordinary things. Destiny paused, listening to the sounds of the city where she'd met Daniel, where they'd fallen in love, where she was continuing the work he'd started. "I miss you every day. But I'm not sad anymore, because loving you taught me how to love everyone. And that's the kind of legacy that never ends." The flowers swayed in the evening breeze, and Destiny felt something she hadn't experienced since Daniel's death, complete peace with the life she was building in honor of their love. 5 years later, the Daniel and Destiny Morrison Foundation had grown beyond anything Daniel could have imagined when he trusted a nursing assistant with his fortune. Medical debt forgiveness, 12,000 families, $340 million in relief. Educational support, 8,700 students, 94% graduation rate, 89% employment in chosen fields. Community health, 73 centers, 350,000 patients served annually. Emergency assistance, 25,000 families stabilized during crises. But the statistics that mattered most to Destiny weren't financial. They were stories like Maria Santos, who'd beaten cancer and been promoted to principal at her school. Like Marcus Morrison, he'd legally changed his name to honor Daniel, now designing infrastructure projects that connected rural communities to educational opportunities. Like the thousands of students who sent thank you letters describing how foundation scholarships had allowed them to become doctors, teachers, engineers, and social workers. Like the families who could pursue dreams rather than just manage survival. On the 5th anniversary of Daniel's death, Destiny stood in the hospital chapel where they'd been married, now serving as the memorial sanctuary for the medical center. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing who I could become before I could see it myself. Thank you for trusting me with resources that have helped so many people. Thank you for teaching me that love creates more love." She placed fresh flowers on the simple memorial plaque. Daniel Morrison. He believed in the power of authentic care. As Destiny left the chapel, she passed the newest addition to the medical center, the Nursing Excellence Wing, where students were learning to provide the kind of compassionate care that had brought her and Daniel together. The circle was complete. Love had created more love. Care had inspired more care. And a billionaire's trust in a nursing assistant's heart had multiplied into a legacy that would help people for generations. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about happily ever after. Sometimes they're about learning to love the world the way someone you loved would have wanted you to. And sometimes the most beautiful ending is realizing that love never actually ends, it just keeps growing.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, You will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.